Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryant and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 142. He's Dave Bryant. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Monday, Steelers Nation. Dave, the Pittsburgh Steelers getting ready for their 3-day mandatory minicamp that runs Tuesday through Thursday, and then they'll break and will not return as a group until training camp in late July. But a busy Monday here with some interviews and some exciting news to pass along to all of Steelers Nation.
Yeah, I don't know about you. I was pretty pumped, obviously, to wake up and see a specific byline on SteelersDepot.com. And then not too long after that, Bryant McFadden dropped his latest episode of his podcast. And it includes a long interview with Troy Polamalu, and that's all. Anytime you get to hear Troy speak in a long interview like that, it's a welcome sight for sure. And yeah, mandatory mini camp coming up this week, and I believe that we'll get to hear from some position coaches this week. Might even get to hear from Danny Smith, Alex.
Ooh, don't tease me like that, Dave. It's been a while.
I don't know for sure, but it should be a pretty eventful week overall, and really probably the last really eventful one until training camp gets underway in late July. So why don't you tell people about the news about Mark Gorscak?
Yeah, really exciting news for the entire Steelers Depot team. As you may have already read on Steelers Depot, if you haven't, go check it out. It's sticky to the top of the site. Mark Gorscak, longtime Pittsburgh Steelers scout who stepped down just a few weeks ago, not retiring from football, moving on to some different football things that maybe he'll talk and write about, but he's going to do some guest writing for Steelers Depot under the Scout's Eye series. Had one article today, his first one go up, that included the letter he wrote or emailed to the organization saying goodbye. It's a really heartfelt and a lot of great takeaways there. And so we'll have Mark occasionally do some guest writing, may even hop back on the podcast from time to time to give his thoughts, not only on his time in Pittsburgh as a scout, how the NFL works, but also just his thoughts on the current present day Steelers. So for Mark, he's basically got free reign to write about what's important to him, but it'll basically be a combination of him telling stories about his time as a scout. There are so many that I'm sure that he has, or it'll be more the technical side, how scouting actually works for those more diehard fans that I know we have so many of. But already a great reception, a positive reception from the readers about the first article from Gorsak. So I cannot wait for more. I already know Mark's working on his second. That's probably a little bit more X's and O's and technical. And so I'm really excited for that one too.
Take my money.
The good news is we're all for free. No paywalls here.
Hey, I from a selfish standpoint here, and I know you feel the same way. Man, we love process, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yep.
we eat as much process as we can get, and we eat the learning. Anytime we can learn more about X's and O's and scouting, the scouting of players, and all those little things. The moment that you think that you know everything when you do this, even as long as we have done it, you're going down the wrong path there. And I'm always open to learning more things. And once again, process. And I'm sure Mark's got a lot of that process that he can pass along to us and others. So, super exciting day. And after stalking him for so long on through the pro day circuits, and obviously watching him all those years running the 40-yard dash at the NFL scouting combine, and really surreal to wake up and see that. So very, very thankful, and hope people enjoy it.
Yeah, I think already people have, again, the reception has been really positive. Again, if you have not checked out the article, do so. Scout's Eye, Mark Gorscak on the hardest part of being a Steeler scout. That is the first article of hopefully many that will go up on the site. But Dave, as you mentioned, Troy Polamalu, a great interview there on the All Things Covered podcast with Bryant McFadden, Patrick Peterson. I saw today there's an interview from Bill Belichick on a separate podcast, and in the Troy interview, has to be like the two most famous, greatest players, coaches that never talk to the media on these long form kind of views. And so pretty special Monday overall. But with Troy, I'm still listening through, haven't heard the whole thing. I know you haven't either, Dave, but I thought it was interesting. I wrote the article, and kind of what struck me the most was Troy talking about when he knew his NFL career was over. It was midway through the 2014 season against the Colts. He talked about one play where he was given a lot of pre-snap freedom to line up basically wherever he wanted to. And he thought about, should I line up here? No, I've already lined up there before. Should I line up there? I've done that before. And he kind of realized I've done everything I can do in terms of the creativity and innovation and that freedom. And that was kind of the first moment he realized that I'm going to move on. And of course, he retired after that season. So a pretty revealing answer there from Troy. But it's a really good interview that I've listened to so far. And it's just always great to hear from Troy.
I've been busy cutting audio and all from that for you guys to write about and all. Did he mention anything about the decision in the Titans?
He did. He was asked, did he ever give consideration to playing for Tennessee, and Dick LeBeau, who was the DC there at the time, and he said no, he did not really give that serious thought or consideration. So I know that's been rumored for quite some time, and he did make a reference to having a tough conversation with Pittsburgh at the end of his career, and we know there were kind of some rumors about the team. I don't know, I don't want to say pushing him out is the right word, but kind of ready to move on there. And so Troy spoke on that a little bit, didn't go into a ton of detail, but did confirm he never really thought about playing for Tennessee.
All right. That's good news. So I look forward to spending part of the day listening to that and reading kind of what you guys write about it as well, too.
Some more Pittsburgh news, although it's a little more related to Houston, but it ties into the Steelers. The Houston Texans announcing that on October 1st, they will, is it put J.J. Watt in their Hall of Honor? Is that
Yeah, right, they're adding J.J. Watt to their Ring of Honor on October 1st, which I believe or I know is the Week 4 Texans home game against the Steelers. And what an appropriate time to do that. Obviously, T.J. Watt, being there with the Steelers, and I would imagine the whole Watt family will be there. And kind of a return to Houston for JJ. I'm sure somebody's going to be cutting onions in my house on that day. Look, I mean, I know JJ Watt's never played for the Steelers, but I mean, I don't know how you can't look back at his NFL career, not only on the field, but off the field as well, too, and just have tons of admiration for the way he's handled all of it. And if you're an NFL player, obviously he didn't win a Super Bowl, but outside of that, I don't know if you can script, a better NFL career. And obviously he's going to end up in the Pro Football Hall of Fame probably as soon as he's eligible and all. So that's something to look forward to as a Steelers fan when it comes to the upcoming schedule, Week 4 at Houston.
Yeah, so mark that one on your calendars. It'll be a pretty cool moment there. Obviously, the focus on JJ in Houston, but I'm sure there'll be shots of TJ and pregame, post-game interactions will probably be out there for sure. So we'll be covering that, and it's just cool to see all those moments from the time where all three brothers played together a couple of years back, and whenever JJ was still in Houston, you had TJ and Derek in Pittsburgh. You had TJ and Derek, their high school jerseys were retired this year on the same night. So just a lot of cool moments. That family's, I can't wait for those guys to write a book. They have to write a book. I mean, there's got to be so many stories they can tell.
There's probably going to have to be a movie about it.
Seriously.
At some point. Yeah. You're finally at the age now where you're starting to see players that came into the NFL while you were cognizant of it and played for a long time and retired, and then going into the Hall of Fame. Obviously, I reached that time years ago, and all. But I mean, it's probably pretty cool, I guess, from a fan aspect, especially someone your age, to see the full development and progress of a career like that, especially for a guy like J.J. Watt.
Yeah, just to see the entirety of someone's career, not the back half, not the twilight, not seeing the stories and the highlights, but from the day the guy got drafted to the day he retires to the day that he'll eventually be inducted into Canton, and to remember that pretty vividly, I think is really cool. I think it's also cool for me just to watch a guy like TJ as he's on a very clear Hall of Fame track, and to sit there in the moment and not have to guess, is this guy going to make it? Is he not going to make it? To know that if his career continues the way that it's gone through his first 6 seasons, he's going to be joining JJ someday in the Hall of Fame, talking about TJ Watt. So it's also pretty cool for me to watch those guys grow up and play and know and appreciate they're having a Hall of Fame career in the middle of their career, not just looking back on it after the fact.
Right. Exactly.
Do you know who that first guy was for you? Who was the guy that you grew up, not necessarily someone that was your favorite player, but somebody that you said, wow, I'm watching greatness? Was it Jerry Rice? Was probably a little too old?
Oh man, that's a great question. I've never thought of it in that aspect. Obviously, they didn't have the coverage
Sure.
around the league. So when you're growing up and you're collecting football cards, the star players on most every team, but it's not like you had more detailed around the league coverage. Obviously you did have ESPN, and you always would watch the highlights with Berman, and I'm talking about and I was already obviously teenager and all at that time, Berman and Tom Jackson and all like that, and even on Monday Night Football in my early life, on Monday Night Football, they do, Howard Cosell would run through the highlights of the weekend real quick. So you knew the star. I think I guess where I'm going with this is it's got to be different for you, because all you've known pretty much is NFL Network and more intimate, I guess, not knowledge of star players outside of Pittsburgh, where it's really, so I can't, I'm struggling to come up with, Jerry Rice and all like that, but I wasn't as dedicated, to the NFL in its entirety as you have been for all these years. Does that make sense? I mean, sure. Obviously I'm a football fan, but a lot of people don't realize I grew up, first of all, my first love was, I think, was baseball, even though the Steelers black and gold caught my attention first. I've told the story before about, my dad was a Cowboys and a Dolphins fan. And, at as early as I think 4 or 5 or something like that, knowing how much he hated his team playing the Steelers, and me taking great joy in that. It started kind of there, but it quickly, you had more baseball coverage as a kid when I was growing up than you did really football coverage, especially down in the South. So my first love was really baseball, and then obviously Pirates. And then it became everything, Steelers, Penguins, and everything like that. So really my deeper fascination with the NFL really came, I guess, with me more as a, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, year old kid like that, but really even deeper, not until really I was in my teens, I guess.
Growing up watching those great 70s Steelers, how much coverage would you get to see of the team throughout the week, especially given that you weren't in Pittsburgh? How accessible were they?
Zero, especially that down in the South. Now, look, obviously, once they started winning and all in the 70s and all like that, you could pretty much count on a game being national coverage down there on Sundays, and then obviously anytime they were on Monday Night Football or anything like that. But to get any kind of news or anything like that, because the paper that we had was the Pensacola News Journal, and there'd be just blurbs about other, if they weren't a near local team like Miami or something like that, you didn't get a lot of coverage. It was just little blurbs here and there. You'd pretty much have to buy like the off-season magazines, and back then, you didn't have a lot of money to even do that. Once again, wasn't until I was into my teens and all like that where I, started to get that aspect of it. But, you'd read the box scores of the games, on Monday morning in the local paper, and maybe see some highlights, throughout the week or whatnot. If you could catch that on the three channel, TVs back in the day, Alex, they only had three, well, actually four, because you had the PBS station if you could get the rabbit ears just right. But it was obviously just ABC, CBS, and NBC, and then your local PBS station and all like that. So yeah, it wasn't, it was hard being a diehard Steelers fan, sure. Especially in the South in the 70s and early 80s.
No YouTube TV like today.
No, man. The young fans nowadays just don't. I mean, that's all they know, and I would have killed to have anything like that or internet to be able to check out, any newspapers online or anything like that. So most of the stuff that you got that was really useful kind of blurbs usually came after the season, and really
the NFL films, probably.
Right. That kind of stuff there. So yeah, I'm shaking my fist at the cloud now. Damn you, young kids. But anyway, yeah, that was part of growing up.
Just one more question on that topic, kind of similar to what I'd asked. Do you remember the first time, though, when technology and coverage and TV got more modern to really efficiently cover a full player's career? Like I think about Barry Sanders more in the 90s. Was that an easier career to kind of, you were older, obviously, A, but B, just to follow his career a bit more closely because there was more access to seeing some of those great players?
Well, I think it was mostly, the internet changed a lot, okay. AOL.
Get your couple hours that you buy for, yeah.
And fantasy football, because once fantasy football came into vogue in the 80s there, they had the books and all like that. And, I was in a local league there. I mean, way back in the 80s and all. So obviously when you had the old, fantasy football sites where you could read the little blurbs and then obviously get linked to any online articles, that was momentous as far as where my football knowledge really took off. And even then, didn't have a good grasp on the X's and O's aspects. It really wasn't until YouTube came along, where you got, a lot more. And even then, in the early days of YouTube, you didn't. But it gave you an opportunity to view more clips and be more aware of more players and that kind of thing. So it's hard, if you want to pinpoint a spot where it was really opened up, my world to more football, it would have been when internet came about.
Which is honestly pretty recent, especially with YouTube. Like YouTube started in 2007, didn't become real popular until, I don't know, probably early 2010s. I mean, that's not that long ago.
Right. It really isn't. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's our trip down memory lane today, but getting all the big news out of the way with Gorsak and Troy and Watt. So Dave, I know you've been hard at work this weekend trying to brainstorm some content, some I think really kind of cool factoids and history and look back, since we're already on the topic of history and kind of, football as it once was. Of the couple of articles that you wrote this weekend, what kind of grabbed you the most? The thing you went, I didn't know that, or I didn't think about that in a while, that kind of made you want to write about it?
Yeah, there was actually a couple overall, and it's stuff that I'm not sure if I can't remember if I knew it or not, kind of things there. One particular, I think, it's the piece that I wrote on Jerome Bettis and the two probably not so well known facts related to the Steelers trading for him. Obviously, if you were 18 years of age or older in 1996, you remember the trade for Jerome Bettis and all like that. And really, I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago, it became more mainstream that in his interview with Steelers.com and kind of, what was it, Legends, or I forget the name of the series that they did of that, though. And he talked about how he had a little bit of a hand in deciding where he wanted to go. He was given the opportunity to get traded to either the Houston Oilers or the Pittsburgh Steelers at the time. And once again, this isn't new news, but I think it just more came more into the public eye back 5-6 years ago when he did that interview there. And he obviously he talked about how he chose the Steelers because of more, storied franchise, especially when it came to the running back position overall. So that was one little nugget that's probably not often talked about when you talk about him being traded to the Steelers there. The other interesting aspect of this, and this one, I can't remember if I had read it before or had heard it, but anyway, it was related to his contract. And when Jerome Bettis was originally drafted by the Rams, he signed a 5-year contract with them. Well, a lot of people probably didn't know that there were incentives in that contract related to his first 4 seasons, that if he in the first 4 seasons, if he made the Pro Bowl at least once, and if in 2 of those seasons he rushed for 1,200 or more yards, he would void the 5th and final year of his contract. And that would have been important to him because it would have allowed him to reach unrestricted free agency a year earlier, and thus cash in earlier on a second deal there. Well, in his first season, everything looked like it was going great for him because first season with the Rams, he made the Pro Bowl. He rushed for over 1,200 yards. But in his next 2 seasons there, he did not rush for 1,200 or more yards. And then thus he was traded to the Steelers in 96 there. And what that did, and a lot of people probably, when it comes to the Steelers, at the time, the Steelers traded for a guy that technically had 2 seasons left on his contract. However, they also traded for a guy that had a huge incentive over his head in that first year in Pittsburgh in 96, meaning that if he was able to rush for 1,200 yards that season, he would void the final 1997 year of his contract and thus be able to hit free agency there. So the Steelers, what they gave up for him, when you look back, at the details related to that deal, the Steelers gave a 2nd round pick that year and their 4th round pick in the 1997 draft, as part of that deal. Now they got back what they get back? A third. Let me pull that up here real quick here. They got back a 3rd round pick in Jerome Bettis, a 3rd round pick in the 1996 draft. And they gave up a 2nd round 1996 draft pick and a 1997 4th round pick there. So it wasn't like they spent a huge amount of draft capital to get him.
Because the Rams were done with him, basically, right? They were just looking to dump him.
Right. Now, obviously, you're swapping a 2nd and a 3rd in 1996, and then you're adding in a 1997 4th round draft pick there. But it's not like it was monumental compensation that they had to give up for him at the time. Sure. And what they were doing is they were leveraging, saying, look, we think this guy can be this player. We think he can obviously rush for more than 1,200 yards. But there was the risk involved in there that if he did, he would become an unrestricted free agent in 1997. And, lo and behold, that's what happened. He obviously rushed for more than 1,200 yards. So they ran the risk of him actually being a one-year rental, at the time. And in fact, I think, because how the NFL calendar was at the time, he technically became an unrestricted free agent that February of 1997. Now, they wasted no time in locking him up, and obviously he was ecstatic to be in Pittsburgh at the time, and saw that as his path. And then they signed him to a 4-year, $14.4 million deal. He became, I think at the time, it was the richest contract the Steelers player had ever signed at the time. I think it made him the third highest paid running back in the league at the time. So just kind of the specific. And look, what if he hadn't had rushed for 1,200 or more yards in 1996? Well, he wouldn't have become a free agent in 1997. Obviously, he's still probably, barring him just looking horribly bad, he still was probably going to be their bell cow running back in 1997, but still would have been under contract with the team on his rookie contract that year, and then been looking to become an unrestricted free agent in 1998. But it's a little bit of to me, more interesting minutia related to that deal that a lot of people. And what if he would have hit free agency and somebody else would have, he wanted wanted to move on, and got a fatter deal from somebody else at the time, So it was really an interesting aspect related to that trade that, could have went several different ways there, especially if he had not rushed for 1,200 more yards, or had he rushed for 1,200 or more yards, they ran the risk of losing him.
Yeah, I didn't realize that about the contract. So thank you for bringing that to light, because I think that's. How did you find that? How did you know that? Was that in a newspaper article at the time?
Yeah, it was just blurbs, and once again, I don't remember if I read it, someone or heard someone talking about it or actually read that before. But I have a subscription to newspapers.com, and man, you want to talk about going down some rabbit holes that way. I have been on some adventures through that with 18 windows open and all like that. And the other and probably boring a few people at this point, but the other interesting aspect after writing that Bettis piece, the thought came into my head because that was only a few years into the salary cap era at the time. So, and obviously the Steelers had traded for Jerome Bettis. I thought to myself, who was the first player that the Steelers traded for in the salary cap era? So I went down that rabbit hole, and that player actually ended up being tight end Tracy Greene. And that happened in, when was it? 1995, a couple of years into the salary cap era. Greene was originally drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs in 1994 in the 7th round out of Grambling, and he played his rookie season obviously with the Chiefs. He had 6 catches for 69 yards. He was converted defensive lineman overall, and really kind of came out of college as a guy that could potentially be a good blocking tight end, or decent above average blocking tight end in the NFL. Played his rookie season with the Chiefs, and a lot of people and that was in 1994 was his rookie season. In 1995, the Steelers lost Eric Greene in free agency that March, and then they proceeded to draft Mark Bruner out of Washington in the first round of the 1995 NFL draft. And at the time, the Steelers were reportedly kind of wanting to try to try to replace Greene with a couple of players, Bruner from the receiving aspect, even though Bruner, wasn't that shabby, if memory serves me, wasn't that shabby of a blocker coming out of college, but he obviously wasn't accomplished yet. So their idea was to kind of try to find another more blocking tight end that they could use, to help kind of alleviate the loss of the well-rounded Eric Greene there. So they went out there and they traded for Tracy Greene, gave up a 7th round selection in the 1996 NFL draft. Tracy Greene ended up dressing all 16 games in that in that 1995 season. He had 2 targets, no catches that I can find, and really the only time he touched the football was against the New England Patriots later in the season on kind of looked like an errant kind of kickoff against the Patriots in that game. Picked it up and ran for 7 yards or something like that. It was the only time he touched the football. Not only did he dress for all 16 games that season in 1995, he also dressed for 2 of the 3. Remember, that was the Super Bowl run year, Super Bowl 30. He dressed for 2 playoff games, didn't get any touches in either of those games, but he was inactive for the for Super Bowl XXX against the Dallas Cowboys there. Now, and really didn't do anything. The Steelers obviously lost that game, but he didn't do anything in the playoffs really notable that year there. Now, he stayed on the Steelers roster that following offseason up until cut time, but he failed to make the make the roster that following season and was effectively done with football after that. But if you want to and look, this article, this post that I did isn't going to do well. It's more of I found something I decided to write about there. But if you want some useless trivia, Tracy Greene was the first player that the Steelers traded for in the salary cap era.
Such a blocking tight end stat line. 2 targets, no catches, 1 random kick return. That is such a blocking tight end type of line to have. So that Super Bowl was the game that Rod Woodson played in. Had he not been active, had Bill Cowher put him on IR, you kind of wonder if Tracy Greene would have been able to say he dressed for a Super Bowl. We'll never know, but you wonder if Greene lost his spot to Rod Woodson.
Yeah, who was the old long-time Jonathan Hayes? I think I remember dressing for the Steelers as a tight end. When did Jonathan Hayes come into the NFL?
The early 90s. I just know him as a coach. He's was a coach or is a coach.
Right. But a lot of people, probably don't know that he was one time. He was a Steeler in 1994 to 1996. And I know for sure that he dressed for that Super Bowl against the Cowboys there. But I think he was also inactive for games. I have to look back now. You got me kind of wondering about that. In what year were we talking? 95 there.
Yeah, he did dress in the Super Bowl. He had 1 target, no catches.
And it looks like he dressed for 16 games as well that season there. So I'll have to look back at the game book if I can find it and see if they only dressed two tight ends maybe for that game. So maybe you make a good point because Rod Woodson was back for that. Maybe Tracy Greene was the one that lost the active helmet for that game.
Maybe, but I love the trivia. I love the nitty gritty. What did Pittsburgh trade for Tracy Greene? Did you get the compensation on it?
It was a 7th round draft pick. Yeah. Okay. 1996 7th round draft pick. That one too took a little bit of research because on Wikipedia it doesn't list anyway, that one ended up I think being part of some sort of Jacksonville deal or something. In other words, it came from Jacksonville via the Steelers or something along those lines. There kind of thing that you kind of got to go down a rabbit hole for there. Kind of speaking on this, on the heels of, man, people can't stop talking about Chase Young, can they? And if you missed some shows already, I think you already know where I stand on my thoughts on the Steelers potentially trading for Chase Young. I'll be absolutely shocked if they do. And secondly, if you look at the Washington Commanders roster as it sits right now, especially the edge position, it doesn't look great if you take Chase Young out of that. So I'll be pretty surprised if they deal Chase Young anyway. But part of all this research and all like that, I was able to build a a list of post salary cap era players that the Steelers have actually traded for. Now, I'm not talking about acquiring, trading for draft. I'm talking about any deal in the salary cap era to date that inquired the Steelers receiving a player. Now, there were obviously some that were draft picks were involved in there. But if you had, I already showed you the list.
Yeah, I'm cheating.
Yeah, you cheated there. But in total, the Steelers have only made 28 trades in the salary cap era that included them acquiring a player. You would think it'd be a little bit higher than that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I'd have to compare it to the rest of the NFL. I mean, Kevin Colbert was, he was a bit more active than people thought, but he wasn't making a ton of trades. So I don't know if that number surprises me or not. I don't know how that compares to other teams.
And in the last, since 2019 alone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 of those have come. 10 of those trades in which the Steelers have acquired a player have happened since 2019. Now that's a pretty, pretty decent sized number. Now, when you look at the list of 28 trades in its totality, not a lot of them are significant. Obviously, the Bettis deal in 1996 was pretty significant. But once again, the compensation, what they gave up, to get him, in addition of having the chance for him actually having 2 years left on his contract, I think needs to be noted when it comes to that deal. Another kind of, fairly significant deal overall when you look at the history related to this was obviously during the 2010 NFL draft, in that trade that with the Cardinals that brought back Bryant, McFadden to the Steelers, and a 2010 6th-round draft pick, which ended up being Antonio Brown. That specific pick. So that's significant. But the Steelers only gave up a 2010 5th-round draft pick to make that happen. The other obviously significant trade in the salary cap era that the Steelers have made was, in September of 2019 when they traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick, right?
Yeah, that was the big one.
That was the big one. But once again, yes, you gave up a 1st-round draft pick as part of that compensation there, but you also got a player that had several years remaining on his rookie contract at the time, right?
Right. He was in year 2 of his rookie deal. I guess the point is, though, is that indicative of the future with a new GM and Omar Khan? And I think, he's been aggressive. I don't think it's been necessarily 100% different than what Kevin Colbert was doing late in his tenure, but we've certainly seen Khan make a lot of moves. So does that history specifically really mean anything for the future under a new GM, a new regime to an extent? I'm not quite sure.
Well, look, I think if you look at these line by line, as far as compensation that the Steelers gave up, most of these are 5th, 6th, 7th round picks, right?
Sure.
Or conditional picks. I mean, you even look back at them dealing for Allen Robinson this past summer. They got Allen Robinson and a 7th round pick for a 7th round pick. And they also got a player under contract for more than past this year on top of it there. Historically, overall, you would say, if the Steelers are to trade for a player the remainder of this summer, it's probably going to be a player that only requires a 5th to a 7th round compensation.
I agree.
Now you do have a new GM involved, and there's that aspect of it. So and look, history is made to have a first time thing happen in it, right? Overall, sure. But I think, and I'm going to circle this back to the whole Chase Young thing. It would be quite significant to see this team actually make a deal for a player like, Chase Young and his pedigree, also considering what you'd probably have to give up for it, especially and all the things that we talked about already. Final year of his contract. If they trade for him before August 1st, you have that roster bonus involved. So it's not, unless you get Washington to eat a significant portion of that, which I'm willing to. And you look at their roster as it stands right now. You throw all this together and you look at it as objectively as you can with all the parameters involved. I will be absolutely shocked if they trade for Chase Young.
Sure, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think we're in peak silly season right now with the Chase Young stuff. If that were to happen, it's not going to happen for a little while. And I think Washington, they want to win now. I know it's been a bumpy career with Young with the injuries, but I think he just stays in Washington this year and they play it out and see what happens. So I'm not suggesting that Young's going to come to Pittsburgh. I just don't know if the history of the draft picks matter so much, especially if it was Kevin Colbert, it might be one thing, but under Khan, I think it's harder to really lean on that history as having any sort of predictive power.
Man, have you looked at the the Commanders' depth chart at the edge position? It's Chase Young, Montez Sweat, F.A. Obata, K.J. Henry, Joshua Pryor, Shaka Toney, William Bradley King, James Smith-Williams, and Casey Toohill.
Yeah, not a great collection of names there. There's some draft nicks that that love some of those guys coming out, Toohill and Toney, but not a lot of big names there.
So just looking at it on the Washington's end of it, it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to deal in. Now, look, if the player just absolutely refuse, and he's not going to refuse to play, but he's going to make, if he were to make strong indications, I want out of here, but, and I know they didn't pick up his 5th-year option and all like that, but I mean, that's not like it's a strange occurrence around the NFL. Mm-hmm. Once again, I think it would behoove Chase Young for his career moving forward to stay right where he's at, prove he's healthy, have a career year, and then put the onus on Washington to either franchise tag him or allow him to hit free agency and hit a big deal that way.
If hypothetically you had to come up with a value that he's worth the trade for, what is that value? Because you have a top pick, the pedigree, the potential, but injuries. Last year was rookie contract, like a 3rd-round pick. Is that what he would fetch if Washington hypothetically dealt him to anybody?
There's no way I'm trading him for less than a 3rd-round pick. None.
Okay.
Especially, and even then, that's bottom rung. And I might want a 3rd and a 6th or something, be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. But it's hard for a team to trade a 2nd or, God forbid, a 1st-round pick for a guy you may only have for 1 year.
Unless the only way I could see doing that is if you're turning around and before the deal is even made, I want permission to talk to the player to see if I can work out a long-term extension with him. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to give up a 1st or 2nd round draft pick for a player in his situation, and then the back end of that, people say, well, look, if he only plays 1 year and he leaves and he has a career year, and he leaves in via free agency, you'll get compensatory value. Well, that's not guaranteed, and also you're not guaranteed round for round. That becomes part of the formula, right? The value and all like that. So once again, if I'm Washington and I'm looking at this, there's no way in hell I take anything. I probably want a 3rd and a 6th, or maybe even a 3rd and a 5th or something like that. Conversely, on the Steelers side of it, or any team side of it, not just the Steelers, if I'm trading for a guy like him that's had some recent injury history, but he has pedigree, and assuming that I have to deal for him before August 1st, before that roster bonus is due, and I'm going to be on the hook for that, and I can't get Washington to eat any other contract there. I want to talk to that player before the deal, and I want to see what are the prospects of working out a long-term extension, even if it's just a 2-year extension or something like that, past the 2023 season. And quite honestly, I mean, Chase Young's market value is not all that when it comes to a contract. So he'd be kind of silly to lock himself into a 2 or 3 year extension at, I don't know, throw a number out there, 5, 6, 7 million a year, because he's not much more. He's not worth more than that, you know.
And
right
what's his
now.
worth even if you extend him? The guy's
Right.
got 1.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons. How much do you pay for that on an extension?
Right. You know, so once again, this all boils back to, I think the best course of action for both the Commanders and Chase Young is for him to stay in Washington for 2023, prove he's healthy, have a a year similar to his rookie season, and then he's going to cash in one way or the other that way, a lot more than he would cash in signing any kind of extension right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's much ado about nothing. I think Young stays in Washington, plays out the year. How does the year go? I don't know. We'll see. It'll be partially health dependent, but I don't see a trade happening to anywhere, let alone Pittsburgh.
And that's what I wrote in that post a week and a half or whatnot ago, you know.
Yeah.
There. I just I don't see it happening.
Dave, you had some more thoughts on Calvin Austin and the Steelers' slot production or lack thereof. And so when you add in Allen Robinson, you get Austin seemingly healthy, running around well right now at OTAs. Hopefully that slot production shoots up in 2023.
Yeah, and not just that. We talked a little bit about this. I didn't have all the stats at the time. I think I was working off of plays of 25 yards or longer. But I went down another rabbit hole since that last show there, and pulled off all of his explosive play stats. And let's see here. Where was it here? Let's see. Austin recorded an explosive play of 20 yards or longer once nearly every 4 touches during his college career at Memphis. To be more precise, once every 3.8 times he touched the football at Memphis, it was an explosive play of 20 yards or longer. An explosive play rate based on his touches, 164 touches at Memphis, 26.2%. If that sounds high, it's because it is. In total, he registered 43 explosive plays on offense in college, and 13 of those resulted in touchdowns. The average length of those 43 explosive plays was 36.4 yards, which again is quite impressive. In case you're wondering, 41 of those 43 were receptions, and 2 others were runs. And I think when you think about a smaller guy like Austin and explosive plays, you're thinking, okay, were a lot of those catch short, run long? Well, I mean, he did have those, but if you look at his totality of his college career, he registered 34 receptions that included 15 or more air yards during his 4 seasons there. And he totaled 156 total receptions at Memphis. So once every 4.58 times the ball he caught was more than 15 yards past the line of scrimmage. So for a small guy like him, that's quite impressive in and of itself there. Now, look, last year or in 2021, the Steelers offense only managed to register 50 explosive plays of 20 yards or longer. Only 4 other teams in 2021 had fewer than the Steelers did. Last season, obviously, wasn't much better. We've talked about quite extensively. They had 52 total explosive plays. And to make matters even worse, when it came to that 52 numbers of explosive plays, only 2 of them resulted in touchdowns. And that was worst in the NFL on that stat when it came to explosive play touchdowns. The average length of those explosive plays was 27.8. This circles back kind of the conversation that we had the other day about Austin. Look, do I expect him to produce an explosive play once every 4 times he touches the football at the NFL level? Probably not. I think that's asking a little bit. But, man, How great would it be to have this guy put his hand in the pile and produce some explosive plays, and not only explosive plays, some double explosive plays, triple explosive plays, and maybe a few that end up in the end zone. So I think that's one of the biggest things to look. And we both, neither one of us think he's going to be an every down 11 personnel player, right?
Right. He'll be a rotational piece.
Right. So how many explosive plays, this guy kind of goes back to our talk the other day. How many explosive plays do you think we can hope to get out of Calvin Austin III in 2023?
Yeah, I had said about 6. Let's just, who were the leaders last year in Pittsburgh? Not that that's the benchmark you want to set because they didn't have enough of them, but I'm just curious to kind of get a gauge for where Deontay, where Pickens, where, Freiermuth, I think, saw a big increase in his sophomore season. But my first thought on Austin was about 6 explosive plays. You call it 5 passing, 1 rushing. I would take that.
I had that pulled up as part of some of this study. I don't anymore. I can pull it up real quick here on, let's see, yards gained of 20 yards or more last year for the Steelers in 2021 gives us ding, 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 ding. Let's see here. Reception wise, George Pickens, 17.
Okay.
Led the team, 17. Now they had what did I say? They had how many rushing? 8 rushing, 44 receiving, 52 in total. Pickens led the team with 18 in total, 17 receiving, 1 rushing. Second on the team behind him was Pat Freiermuth with 9.
Saw him get worked vertically a lot more. His ADOT, his yards per reception went way up from his rookie year. I thought it was the one thing that Matt Canada did well in 2022.
And the whole, lack of yards after the catch and all probably hampered Deontay Johnson in that category more than any single player on the Steelers roster in the explosive play category last season. He had 7 in total.
Yeah, that's far too light for what he's capable of. So, I mean, just to gauge it, I still stand by about 6 for Austin. If he wants to do more, then hey, I'm all for it. And there's going to be potential there for him to have some really big plays. But I think given the snap count, given the involvement, I would say about 6 sounds right.
And look, you obviously, want to see, the rest of these guys, Pickens, Freiermuth, Johnson, see an increase in the explosive play category. I'll tell you this, 52 explosive plays in 2023 is not going to cut it.
Sure. No, not even close. Let me ask you this, though, about Austin. And I think the answer is partly variety. It's not putting him in one category. But if you had to kind of loosely create a game plan for how to use Calvin Austin in 2023, how would you best use him? How do you want to utilize him in this offense?
Yes.
Be a little more specific.
Look, this is a guy that came out of college that showed he can play some Z. I think played more Z than he actually did in the slot overall. I think.
Oh yeah, he was primarily an outside guy in college.
I think he's a guy that you move around, because moving him around in the offense makes defenses have to account for him. So first and foremost, the thing that I want to see with Calvin Austin when he's on the field is him moved around. Second, you have to get him the football, in other words, the football does not need to go to him every time he's on the field. Then we get back into the flashing red light scenario there. So, here comes Calvin Austin on the field. He's probably going to, tendencies show 5 out of every 7 times he's on the field is going to get the football. Okay. So you have to make sure you watch your tendencies as far, and look, obviously there's progressions in passing plays, right? So you're going to have some plays that are designed, I think, specifically for him as the target in the passing game. And then some where it's going to be part, obviously of a progression. He's a guy you're absolutely going to see in the jet sweep. Sorry, folks. but you have to try to utilize that aspect of his skill set. And I think you can do some other, creative things with him. But I think the key thing when he is on the field is, and you have to mix in some shot plays for him down the field, even at his size. Once again, the fact that he was able to catch so many footballs more than 15 yards down the field at the college level, I think you got to give him the opportunity to be in some of those even and leaving type situations, if you will, and throw it out there and see if you can overthrow him or not. But I think it all boils down to being creative with him on offense and moving him around and getting the football in his hands in as many different scenarios as possible. That's the key when it comes to him.
Yeah, I think you said it well. I think space leverage in terms of the short underneath concepts, you're going to see a lot of pre-snap motion, a lot of window dressing in that sense that you can utilize and play off of. But I think, out in the flat, out in space, him in motion, you get him the ball, out in the flat and he's already running. I think it's going to be important for him. Utilize that speed, utilize that post-catch ability. I think in terms of the more vertical concepts, I thought Pittsburgh late in the year was pretty effective with some of their stacks and bunches. You get Austin the free release. He can really wreak some havoc. I think we're seeing the NFL go to more too high shell, middle of the field open. That's going to utilize posts and some of the deep in cuts that I think Austin can win on more often. So while I think Frymuth made some of those plays downfield, more middle of the field last year, I think Austin can do that in this kind of too high world the NFL is evolving back to.
Look, imagine a scenario, if you will, like early in the game, either the first series somewhere in there, you have him on the field and you run a jet sweep good for, an explosive play. What does that do to having him on the field and using him in motion the rest of the game?
Yeah, creates that threat, puts that seed in the defense's mind of, we got to watch this guy.
Now, look, there's obvious concerns when it comes to a player like him, right? He's already had the foot injury, but it by all accounts, it sounds like he's on track to be fully past that. We hope he is. Second, obviously, is his size. Now, you throw out a guy like him, people automatically want to call him Dre Archer, but and I think that happened to you on Twitter over the weekend here. Mm-hmm. Explain why Austin and Dre Archer are that conversation can't be had yet.
It's not the same. Archer never had a defined role in the NFL. Pittsburgh didn't know what to do with him. They called him a running back. They didn't use him as a running back. They didn't use him between the tackles because they couldn't. They didn't use him in pass protection because they couldn't. I remember the first backs on backers drill, all the running backs go over to the corner of the end zone and Dre Archer, jogs along to go with the receivers. Your first sign of, okay, they don't view him as a running back. Austin is a receiver. He's been a receiver. What he did in college will be, similar to what he does in the NFL. Archer was a really good athlete in speedster, but never really had a home and a fit in terms of his position, his role. How would you use him? There was no clear answer to that. It was Pittsburgh's biggest miss in terms of evaluating and drafting Dre Archer. With Austin, I'm not saying his career will be great. I don't know how good of a career he'll have, but the definition of how he wins, how he can be used is far clearer than it ever was for Dre Archer.
Once again, what we know about Austin to this point, we're still having to speculate a lot because, he obviously didn't play a single down, didn't even get to see him in a preseason game last season. So for you got to see him a little bit, in training camp there, but we're people listening to this. It's hard, we can't, there's no way we can definitively say what he is or isn't going to be at the NFL level yet. We don't even have a glimpse of what that really even looks like. All we're saying is based on the college tape, based on production, based on how we think that, you would, if you're going to get your money's worth out of him, you're going to get him on the field and, how many snaps a game, would you look to try to have him on the field? 20? 15?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, if Pittsburgh's going to play a lot of big people, it may not get Austin on the field as often because as a blocker, he's not going to offer much there. Allen Robinson can do more. Yeah, 15 sounds about right.
And once again, you'd like to see him moved around quite a bit. You'd like to see the football in his hands in different situations within that. If he's going to hit where he's going to benefit this offense the most, or at least early in his career now, is the explosive play aspect of his game, because he's probably, what does it look like on average? Potentially, assuming got to throw all these qualifiers out there because people will throw them back at you and say, you said this, but assuming, the offense stays healthy and all like that. I mean, are we looking at 2 to 3 touches a game for him on average in 2023, or is that too high? Because 2 times 17 would be 34 touches. That feels a little stiff, to be quite honest. That feels a little bit rich, but it's not unachievable. Some people have said, well, I see it more as 3. Well, 3 times 17 would be, what is 51. That? 51. That really seems kind of,
yeah.
That feels like somebody got hurt.
Which is a distinct possibility.
Right.
Receiver room probably won't stay healthy the entire season. Yeah, I had posed the question a while back, who's going to have more offensive touches this year, Darnell Washington or Calvin Austin? I think that's going to be a really good litmus test for the type of offense Pittsburgh wants to be, how successful their plan is. Obviously, if you're going to be a team that wants to run the ball and play with a lead, you're going to have those big people late in games. You're not playing from behind. If they can't establish the run, they can't run the ball well, they're going to play from behind and be an 11 personnel late in some of these games. So I think that's a number to watch.
So anywhere between 34 and 50, what'd you say?
51.
Does that seem like a window of touches for him in 2023?
Yeah, it seems reasonable. I had about 30 in my head on the number of touches for him. Maybe a bit more. You factor in some injuries that'll give him some more opportunities, assuming, of course, he stays healthy.
All right, and the other thing that we've talked about, just as a team overall is what can Calvin Austin do after the catch? Obviously he had great success after the catch at Memphis there. That's one area, along with the explosive plays, which, will be a byproduct of all this, that he can really help this team. So how will it turn out? I mean, look, he is undersized, so there is those concerns. I worry about all undersized players in the NFL. I worry about Bryce Young coming in as an undersized quarterback. I worry about receivers that are undersized, such as Calvin Austin III. That said, it doesn't stop me from watching, because remember that kid last year out of Utah State, Tompkins. Man,
yeah, Devin Tompkins.
I mean, that guy's tape was absolutely incredible. Catching a football down the field, contested catches. But what did he end up doing his rookie season? Nothing. And he was an undrafted player, right?
Yeah, I mean, he had a tough hill to climb. I think he had earned some buzz. I think he's still hanging around, so that's more than what a lot of guys can say. Yeah, I think the small players are always fun to watch. I don't really watch any highlight reels, but the one guy that I do watch, I think, what is some of the most fun tape to ever see is Jakeem Grant out of Texas Tech. He was so much fun to watch, and he's had success as a return guy. Speaking of which, for Austin, can he help out in the return game? He didn't do really anything on kicks in his career, limited on punts. Again, kicks aren't going to be as valuable, but punts will be important, and you still need a kick returner. There are going to be still some kick returns. Hopefully, Austin can secure both of those spots, and maybe you get an explosive play there once or twice. Look at the Bucs game last year. Steven Sims with that big run back. That helped change that game and help Pittsburgh pull off that upset victory. So those are other areas where you can hopefully contribute some of those big splash plays.
I didn't get this data early enough to put in my post on Austin and the explosive plays the other day there, but I reached out to Andrew Shaver, who of course has written for us in the past, works for Pro Football Focus. I was wanting to know and have it ready by the time of the post, but once again, I didn't have it ready, but since then I've got this. I wanted to know from 2019 to 2021, which were the final 3 seasons of Calvin Austin's college career, 2019 to 2021, among FBS players, I wanted to know who had the most explosive play receptions of 20 yards or more. All right. Because I had a feeling that, man, how can Calvin Austin III not rank high in such a list? Well, as it turns out, Andrew got that information for me. From 2019 to 2021, among FBS players and explosive play receptions of 20 yards or more, and some of these names are going to hit hard on you.
Okay.
I know you don't have. I know you don't have this list because I didn't forward it to it because I want to have some aspect of this. Jalen Tolbert out of South Alabama,
down there in Dallas. Yeah.
Right. And you got to see him didn't you see him at was it the Senior Bowl, right?
Yeah, it was his backyard.
Right.
It was still, I think, at Lad Peoples or something, but yeah, the Mobile. So yeah, he's a speedster.
All right. From 2019 to 2021, 56 explosive play receptions. Second on the list, this one will hit home, Devontae Smith. 51 of those out of Alabama. The next one, Khalil Shakir out of Boise State. Had 44 of them from 2019 to 2021. Number 4 on the list, tied with Jacob Cowling out of UTEP, which I don't remember watching much Jacob Cowling film. Calvin Austin III. 43 explosive play receptions. Now, Calvin Austin III, those 43 equated to 614 yards, whereas Jacob Cowling had 43 equated to, 43 for Calvin Austin. It was the yards after the catch, 614 yards after the catch. Jacob Cowling had 43, had 470 after the catch there. Right after those guys was Romeo Dubs.
Your guy.
Out of Nevada. Also tied with 42, Sky Moore out of Western Michigan.
We talked about a lot in that class. Thought he would be the receiver Pittsburgh would go after instead of they get Pickens, they get Calvin Austin. So yeah, I mean, Austin, we know he's a big play guy. It sounds like the speed is still there. We'll have to see the involvement. Again, this guy's not played in an NFL game, not even a preseason contest. So there's still a long ways to go in the evaluation process, how they use him, how he looks. Can he overcome the size concerns? Can they have, so again, there's going to be variety with him, but you want to have a plan too. So you're trying to walk that line between both of those aspects. So be watching that very closely.
All right. So the main takeaway we're both trying to get to here for the listeners here is, man, a healthy Calvin Austin III in 2023. You certainly would like to see the explosive play contributions. You would definitely like to see, and another kind of spinoff piece that I wrote off that I won't go too deep into that. You'd like to see him play some in the slot along with Allen Robinson III, because this team absolutely has to have more slot production than they had last season.
Yeah, they had very, very little, even with Chase Claypool, but certainly after dealing him, I mean, they had nothing there. They were just jet sweeps and orbit motions with Sims and Olszewski the entire season. And I mean, again, those guys, Sims and Olszewski, had more rushes than they had receptions in Pittsburgh last year. So just to sum up the lack of production there, Sims made a couple of plays, but right. That was about it. So yeah, with you there overall. I think in terms of the path for Pittsburgh, creating more big plays, improve the scheme to allow Deontay Johnson more yak opportunities, get Austin on the field, utilize that speed, that big playability. And for George Pickens, I think on a personal level, he has to work on his route running, improving his yak, getting downfield or getting upfield a bit more, focused on that. So I think for Pickens, you've seen that improvement. I thought late last year he was getting better. He was being moved around the formation more often, but I think he's got to work on some things because he was a pretty raw receiver coming out.
And once again, if this team only going to register 52 to 55 to 56 explosive plays in 2023, I don't think that's going to cut it. I think that number probably needs to be, close to 70.
Yeah, and the yak has to go up. They were 4.0, I think, yak last year, and that was the worst in football. So for yards after the catch per reception was their number, and that was the worst mark. Again, all the top receivers they had were among the bottom. Deontay Johnson was terrible. Pickens was basically the worst yak receiver in football. And that part of that, explosive plays come one of two ways. It's either the yak or it's the actual air yards. And Pickens is the air yards kind of guy. And so he's not going to ever be a guy that's going to have a tremendous amount of yak, just given the vertical nature of his position and how he wins. But there are still some ways as he refines his route running and opens up his route tree to improve that yak so it's not the worst in football. All right, Dave, anything else from your rabbit hole? You were digging a lot this weekend. Anything else you wanted to pass along?
Yeah, I ended up falling down and watching that game with Tracy Greene against the Patriots.
Who won that game?
The Steelers won that game. They had a couple of defensive, I think, fumble returns in that game for touchdowns at that. So defense played a huge part in that game. So you know how it is. You get going down these rabbit holes and you come across this game and then you start watching the damn game and hours go by. But anyway, it ended up being a fun rabbit hole weekend for me.
All right, Dave, I think we can get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
All right. I feel like I've talked too much.
No, you're fine. Also, we do have a live stream tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So if you have any questions about our conversation or anything else, you can hang out with Dave and myself on the YouTube channel from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern time. Also, my Kenny Pickett full breakdown will be coming very, very soon, sometime this week, within the coming days. Almost done with the video, so that will finally get released. It's going to be a long video, so buckle up.
All right. I will certainly go down that rabbit hole to watch that. Garrett Slingerland writes, hey, Dave and Ox, thanks for all you do. This is hands down the best Steelers-related content out there, in my opinion. I'm predicting Najee's yardage stays roughly the same. He says, I've got him in the 1100s, but I also have him feasting on the goal line with 13 touchdowns. I expect a leap from Warren, and I think that he'll eat into Najee's carries. Now my question, can we get an over-under for receptions for Darnell Washington? Yeah, that's something as kind of we've had some conversations about that what, with a healthy Freiermuth, assuming all these other eligibles stay healthy, what does an over-under for receptions for Darnell Washington look like? And look, I think you'd be foolish not to use him in some of those quick kind of, roll out, tight end screen type things that he was utilized quite a bit, at Georgia there. So, I envision a good, 5, 6, 7, maybe receptions coming, less than 5 yards, less than 3 yards past the line of scrimmage for starters there, to try to get a big guy like that, the football out in space and test somebody, if they want to make some business decisions in there. A good over-under for Darnell Washington right now. Why does 25 pop into my head?
I was about to say the same. Yeah, because I thought with Austin Washington trying to be the first to 30 receptions, I think that's might be a little too tall for Washington. The only thing that's too tall for him, maybe. So I think 24.5 might be the number.
Okay. Some people probably screaming to hammer that over, but I think if you have a healthy Freiermuth and just all these other eligibles that you have, it's going to be tough for him to what would you take on 24.5? Over or under? I'd probably lean to under, man.
I might go over, but just so slightly. That's a really tough number.
Yeah, and I think even the question that we've also posed is who has the more receptions. I think Austin might win in touches, but who has the most receptions between Austin and Darnell Washington in a perfect world?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch, but hopefully again they can stay healthy, be productive. You can mix match personnel, and your offense is better off for it.
All right, Brett Niles says, I had a question about Andrew Voorhees. I know Dave was enamored with his tape. Look, I wasn't the only.
Yeah, it was more me, I think.
I was turned on because of what Alex wrote up on him early in the process there. He says, and obviously his draft stock was hurt by the knee injuries. My question is, assuming he will miss his entire first year, Should the Steelers have traded their 6th round pick next year in order to draft him like the Ravens did? He says, I'm pretty sure that other team expect the Steelers pick next year to be higher than the Ravens. So I have to think had the Steelers made that offer, it would have been accepted. So will he be better than the likely 6th rounder next year after the injury? I mean, we're in hypothetical land here. Look, for starters, I mean, how serious was that knee injury? How tough will it be to come back from? I mean, we don't know the answers to those questions. I can't imagine that he wasn't on the Steelers' radar prior to the knee injury. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have been mad about it. I like the player. I like the idea of stashing him. I just wonder in Pittsburgh, I mean, you have your guards in place. You should have James Daniels and Isaac Seumalo be your starters in 2024, and you have Nate Herbig under contract through 2024. And he got dinged, I think, a bit, because sometimes those guys with the ACLs, they don't always fall. He fell a bit because of the age, right, because he's going to be like 26 by the time he takes his first NFL snap. So I think the combination of those two things hurt him some. So, should they have done it? I'm not going to lose sleep over that. You can't make every move that sounds, good on paper. So I think Pittsburgh is certainly concentrated on improving their offensive line, and that's the only thing I really care about, the macro perspective.
I'll tell you this: I would not have batted an eye if they had have traded a 6th round draft pick last year for him.
Yeah, I mean, I would have been good with that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good move by Baltimore. It's kind of what the Ravens do and why they draft pretty well annually.
Austin Hackett. Hey guys, happy Sunday. Hope you're both having a great weekend. Question for you regarding the backup center position. Apologies if you already discussed this, but if you're Kevin Dotson, shouldn't you be hoping and preparing for the Steelers to give you a shot of trying to play center at camp? If he's going to make it with the Steelers, or really any team for that matter, as a backup interior offensive lineman, when he really wants some center experience, not to mention the Steelers really don't have any proven options themselves at that spot. Wouldn't it be in the best interest of both sides to at least give him some looks in the preseason? Also, just curious, aside from his lack of experience, are there physical traits Dotson lacks that come with the center position? Yeah, look, I mean, it's that might be a question for Mark Gorscak next time we have him on or something like that. What are some of the traits? And look, first and foremost, he just doesn't have experience at it. He played, nearly every snap that he played at Louisiana Lafayette was at right guard. We've talked about that in the past there. I will tell you this: if I were Kevin Dotson, I would try to make my versatility as best as it possibly could be, even if it would mean doing it outside of practice or whatnot. Do I think the Steelers are going to give him much shot at playing center in training camp and moving forward? No, I don't. I mean, for just a lot of reasons, first and foremost, I think I'm not going to be surprised if Spencer Anderson's getting that look. Mm-hmm. And, there's only so many snaps to go around too. So I would be surprised if we hear much of Kevin Dotson getting some snaps at center. However, if I were Kevin Dotson, I would once again try to increase my position flexibility as much as I possibly could.
Yeah, I don't think Pittsburgh has plans to move him to center. I don't think they really have hardcore plans for him to be on this roster. And so why have him become your backup center only to potentially cut him? I know that could increase his value, but I think, they're going to go other directions. Dotson has never really played center. He's messed around with it on the side, training pre-draft back in 2020, but never really done it in a game. In terms of the skill set, I think intelligence. Can you make the line calls? Can you be able to read and help set protections, especially for a young quarterback and Kenny Pickett? I don't know if Dotson can or can't, but I don't get the feeling he's the most cerebral offensive lineman in the world. I'm not trying to dog the guy. I just, I think he's not Marquise Pouncey or something like that. So that's probably the number one requirement to play center. And of course, experience and consistent, accurate snaps and all that. So not something I expect Pittsburgh to really go down that road and go down that path with Dotson this offseason.
Yeah, same here. All right, Alex, I think we made it through the weekend emails here. Didn't know. Hopefully I didn't talk too long when it comes to, but I went down a lot of holes that I wanted to talk about in today's show, and we'll have more to talk about, different aspects of mandatory mini camp the rest of this week. Some position coaches, hopefully we're talking about some things that they've had to say and all like that. And don't we have something going on tonight?
Yeah, again, have our live stream 7 p.m. Eastern time. Dave and I answering your Steelers questions. Just search my YouTube channel, Alex Kozora. Be on for an hour till 8 p.m. Eastern time. Go read that Mark Gorscak article. Certainly worth your time. Let us know your feedback as well. And thank you to everyone who has sent me the alien footage. I've gotten a stream of alien clips and messages, and so appreciate that. And so, some of them seem fake, but I'm always willing to take a look.
Here's a movie. I mean, you've never watched Close Encounters of the Third Kind, have you?
Never have, no.
Yeah, that was a huge movie back in the day. That might be something that you might look for taking in, watching the movie after mandatory minicamp and all like that.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Until Wednesday, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. You can follow Alex Kozora on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button up right navigational bar. Get by the site, even though it's, slower, we trying to come up with a lot of different series and all to keep everybody entertained. I think the crew's doing a great job on that. Got a lot of stuff coming in development right now as far as that goes. Once we get past mandatory mini camp, we hope you stop by and read it. Just, hey, thank you for all the support that you continue to give the site, myself, Alex, and all the contributors. It means a lot to us to be able to wake up every day and do what we do, and we don't take that for granted. So in the meantime, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.